Good afternoon. This is Evelyn Pringle. Welcome to Trish and Evie's Focus on the Facts. Patricia Negron is my co-host, and for over 2 years now, she has been my partner in crime in the battle to stop the global pedophile epidemic. So today, we will again cover the latest developments in the Jeffrey Epstein global child sex trafficking network and discuss the elite politicians, celebrities, and world leaders who are involved in this network who are set to be exposed with the release of court documents hidden from all of us for years. In the latest court hearing, the judge said that Epstein and his attorney, Alan Dershowitz, were both involved in Epstein's child sex trafficking network. We will also cover the takedown of the Hollywood pedophiles and sex trafficking networks, with a focus on the duration of the open pedophilia has been taking place in Hollywood over the past 40 years. A couple days ago, a street artist in Los Angeles, who goes by the name of Sabo, he tied the whole Epstein case together with the Hollywood perverts and pedophiles. On a giant billboard that advertised Quentin Tarantino's new movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sabo replaced the faces of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio with the faces of Jeffrey Epstein and Roman Polanski. He also made similar alterations on several bus stop posters advertising the same movie, and he put the faces of Epstein and Woody Allen in the bus stop posters. And on the bus stop posters, Sabo changed the name of the movie to Once Upon a Time in Peterwood and gave credits for the movie to Weinstein Buck NXIVM Singer Productions, which was apparently in reference to disgraced perverts and pedophiles producer Harvey Weinstein, Democratic donor Ed Buck, the NXIVM child sex cult, and director Bryan Singer. Today, we'll also discuss the length of time that the Hollywood pedophiles have been openly operating in full sight, starting with director Roman Polanski and then Michael Jackson, Bryan Singer, and R. Kelly, and give the details of how long these pedophiles have been allowed to sexually abuse children in this country and often track children on a global level. So I'll bring Trish on now, and we'll start the show by first having her give us the latest world news on Iran, Israel, and Venezuela, and then we'll get into the battle against the pedophiles and perverts. Welcome to the show, Trish.
Hi, Evelyn. That's a great summary. Lots of really interesting stuff going on with the child sex trafficking. I mean, it's incredible what we're finally able to get confirmation of. It's great. So at the same time, you know, the very people who are implicated in this whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal are behind the terrorism in the Mideast and the refugee crisis and all these other issues that we're facing now. So it's really important to remember that, you know, while talking about Jeffrey Epstein and child sex trafficking and then going to, you know, foreign policy and global geopolitics, they are directly connected. The only reason we have all this death and destruction going on is because of the blackmail operations run by people like Jeffrey Epstein and Claire Bronfman and Harvey Weinstein and all these other people. So it's really important to remember that they are directly connected. But right now, Syria is the real big hot spot. There's breaking news of a U.S. coalition massacre of Syrian civilians. And this, you know, they continue, Pompeo and the State Department officials continue to blame these events on Assad. However, they are being carried out by the U.S. and its proxies, as well as its allies, which include Israel, Turkey, and the U.K. So, you know, these civilians are dying at the hands of the U.S. and its allies. Right now, there's an estimated 30,000 terrorists that the U.S. has airlifted out of other parts of Syria and into Idlib, where there's a major holdout going on and an offensive by Russia and Syria to drive out those terrorists. So that situation, Israel continues bombing civilians in Syria and other key locations. So that situation continues to escalate. And I think part of it is in response to these revelations. Netanyahu himself is facing a second emergency election. It's unprecedented. He also has 3 indictments, corruption indictments, hanging over his head by his own attorney general at the recommendation of his own police chief. He lost his coalition in the Knesset last October. He had 2 cabinet ministers resign. He assumed those posts and then ended up firing a 3rd cabinet minister, and then was holding all 4 of those positions, but has since turned over the defense minister position to someone very friendly to the idea of Netanyahu receiving immunity from those corruption cases. After this emergency election in April, Netanyahu failed to form a coalition a second time and was unable to pass legislation that would have given him immunity from these corruption charges. So he is desperately fighting for his political life right now. And one of the reasons, again, to remember that all of this ties together is that Ehud Barak, who is a former prime minister and oversaw many war crimes himself against Palestinians, is running against Netanyahu for prime minister in this second emergency election to be held September 17th. And Netanyahu very conveniently pointed out Ehud Barak's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in an attempt to smear him and salvage his campaign for prime minister. So now we have public confirmation of Israel being directly connected to Jeffrey Epstein, in addition to the fact that Alexander Acosta, who was Donald Trump's labor secretary, and just resigned because of the revelations that the plea deal he allowed Jeffrey Epstein, let him walk on, really outrageous child sex trafficking charges. I mean, the guy was obviously prolific, and he had the means and motive to continue offending and victimizing hundreds of more children. Yet they let him walk, and Alexander Acosta himself is on the record saying that he was told to back off, that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to, quote-unquote, intelligence, which means that's what our intelligence agencies are protecting uber predators of children. So, pretending that they have any legitimacy whatsoever should no longer be in doubt. So now we also see Israel escalating dramatically in retaliatory attacks on Palestinians. 2 weeks ago they shot a 10-year-old boy in the head. Yesterday or the day before, they shot a Palestinian girl in the street and let her lay there bleeding to death, and did not allow anyone near her until after she had died. Another man was shot in the stomach by a sniper and killed. They've killed, 56 children in the last year, which is more than one a day. These settlers are escalating their attacks on Palestinian and setting fires. They are destroying orchards. The military is on an absolute rampage, destroying Palestinian homes and making Palestinians homeless. And then the U.S. just blocked a UN sanction against Israel, which is an official apartheid state, mind you, okay? This is official apartheid that we have in place here. And the U.S. just passed legislation the House of Representatives just passed legislation overwhelmingly criminalizing criticism of Israel and support of boycott, divestment, and sanction activity in protest against apartheid in Israel. So, we're facing an absolute crisis on that front, and you can see as all of these revelations are made, that the fervor among these leaders to entrench themselves and withstand, be able to hang on to their power is they're getting more desperate, and they're just getting worse. However, in Yemen, the UAE has said that it is withdrawing entirely from that Saudi massacre there. And this is very significant because apparently the UAE has been the primary military presence on the ground in Yemen. But the bottom line in Yemen is that it is an absolute genocide. It is a Saudi invasion backed by the U.S., not only with billions and billions in weapons deals, but the U.S. trains those Saudi pilots, they refuel those jets, and they provide the coordinates for all of those missile strikes. And every single one of those missile strikes is on a civilian, non-strategic target. They are on maternity wards. They are on school buses full of children. They are on fish markets, weddings, schools themselves, water treatment facilities. And there was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there was a group trying to bring humanitarian aid to the people in Yemen, and the only port by which this aid can get there from abroad is Hodeida Port. Well, 3 days before this humanitarian aid was set to arrive, Saudi Arabia bombed Hodeida Port 8 separate times. And the U.S. is now behind a blockade on that port, preventing humanitarian aid from reaching literally millions of babies on the brink of death from starvation. They are in the advanced stages of starvation. This is not we're not in the early part of the crisis here. Many of them are so far advanced they could not be saved. And there are nearly 100,000 have already starved to death, and this is absolutely deliberate. This is not an accident of war. This is a deliberate.
No, our Navy ships blocking these supplies and stuff to Yemen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So the UAE is withdrawing, and this is very good news because it puts the U.S. and Saudi Arabia in a defensive position. Now it's even harder to explain away their rationale for being there. So it's a very positive development. It weakens Saudi Arabia. At the same time that this is happening, Yemen has developed a set of drones that have become very effective, and they are used to target strategic locations in Saudi Arabia, like military airports and locations that Saudi Arabia is using to attack Yemen. So it's also really important for people to know that the Houthis are a militia that has formed. It is Yemeni people who are defending Yemen. These are not like the terrorists shipped in by the U.S. from all over the world into Syria to invade it. Those are terrorists. The Houthis are not the same thing. They are fighting in their own country for their own people. And that's the same thing with Hezbollah. So it's really, really important to know that. But, I think it's pretty. Go ahead.
I think it's hard for people to understand all these different groups and everything, and to keep them straight in their mind. At least for me, it is.
Oh, of course.
But who is actually who?
Yeah, no. I mean, I still am learning myself, Evelyn. The ones I do know about, in fact, are that Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Really, Hamas is a Zionist creation, but Hamas is defending the Palestinian people. They're not invading anyone. It's their defense. Right. So same with the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. These are, Nicaraguans who are defending their country and their people from imperialists like the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. So So the Houthis are getting really effective in striking back against Saudi aggression, and it's making the Saudis really nervous. They did not expect that. And at the same time, Yemen is getting support from Iran and other countries in the region because, again, they're under the same threats as Iran and Syria and Russia and China are all facing as well. So we're also seeing at the same time this coalition forming. Now Putin has offered to lead a coalition for stability in the Mideast and has publicly stated that it is not a military solution. So what he's proposing is to bring peace to that region, which is in everybody's best interest. Remember, there's the China-Pakistan economic corridor that is being disrupted by all these terrorist activities. Syria is suffering the same fate. These locations all fall along the Silk Road and Belt Initiative, where all of this trade is supposed to occur, and the routes by which it's supposed to reach, across from China to Europe, and which goes straight through Turkey. And then there's also that connection from, Turkey and along the eastern shore of the Mediterranean down to the African continent, which is, where Saudi Arabia is and Egypt. So, there's a lot of, there are a lot of reasons why those leaders would want peace and stability, because they benefit from the free flow of trade through those regions. But that's exactly what the U.S. is trying to disrupt. So this is, but the balance of power is shifting dramatically away from the U.S. Turkey has refused to cow to pressures by the U.S. around its purchase of S-400 systems from Russia. India is saying that they're, going to move forward with their own plans as well, despite the U.S. Imposition of sanctions in response to India's purchase of Russian S-400 systems. So, and these different nations are able to ally with one another, and get the public support of leaders like Russia and China for their sovereignty and their right to determine their own needs in terms of defense and weapons purchases. And in fact, Boeing, Boeing suffered. They only got half the orders of Airbus at the Paris Air Show recently, and they've had all kinds of performance issues, and now it's starting to turn up in other areas, like these foreign nation purchases of Boeing jets. They're starting to rethink that. So this is also very positive in that it hurts the revenues of these war profiteering companies, and it really hurts them in a material way. So it's evolving very much in the right direction and in very much the right ways in terms of putting an end to these forces at work. I mean, you have to cut them off from their cash flow, and they're actually doing it to their self-sabotaging, because they produce really poor equipment and it's way too expensive. And in fact, they're talking about India's rethinking a drone purchase because of performance issues. They're like, not only can we get fighter jets that are fully loaded for this amount of money, these other fighter jets actually work, whereas your drones don't even, aren't even fully functional. So, it's a matter of dollar and cents as well at this point. So the bottom line, though, is that they now have a legitimate alternative in Russia and China to turn to for trade, for economic support, for military support, and currency support. So the balance of power has very decisively shifted away from the U.S. and its Western allies toward the East with Russia and China and these Mideast nations that are out of sheer need allying with one another in ways that we were not seeing previously and are finally evolving. So in Venezuela,
what's the bottom line in Venezuela now? I see we just Venezuela that's knocked the power out again. But
so you remember Guaido got caught embezzling humanitarian aid funds raised at the Richard Branson concert. And so what the U.S. decided to do was divert another $40 million in humanitarian aid for starving children in Guatemala and Honduras to give the guy who just embezzled other humanitarian aid funds. I mean, it's just sickening. It's the same kind of thing. They just attacked the electric grid again, knocked out power to the entire country. These are acts of terrorism, and they kill people. These sanctions the U.S. is now refusing to release funds for Venezuela to buy food and medicine and medical supply. The U.S. previously held up a supply of insulin. They would not allow the money transfer to go through so that Venezuela could pay for the insulin. People die because of these acts. They are terrorist acts. These are weapons of war, and they are just as lethal as bombs. An estimated 40,000 Venezuelans have already died from these sanctions, and the U.S. is only escalating it. And now they've funneled another $40 million to Guaido to pursue this coup attempt. So, and meanwhile, Venezuela has reported seeing numerous spy planes, U.S. spy planes in its territory. But meanwhile, Russia and China have, Russia specifically has declared their plan to help Venezuela retain its sovereignty, and are doing whatever they can to help. But this is another example of how the U.S. uses, these financial networks to steal from countries. And Russia has developed this alternative to the electronic funds transfer system that the U.S. has called SWIFT, so that these target nations can use the alternative and not risk having their money stolen from them, like has been done so frequently to others. So this is, things continue to escalate in Venezuela as well. And, remember the Koch brothers are behind a lot of that. They want that extra dirty crude that their refineries can take. The U.S. has already stolen Venezuela's oil assets in the U.S. The Bank of England has stolen more than $1 billion worth of gold. It's open warfare, but these are just, silent weapons and quiet wars. It's sickening. So,
like I said last week, I never understood these sanctions until a few years ago and what they're doing to all these people all over the world.
Yeah,
I never understood what they were
Evelyn.
doing.
Yeah.
But this is just open genocide, like we talked about
it is.
for so many weeks now. It used to be they do this stuff in secret, overthrow these countries and pull this crap, and we wouldn't know it, But now since the Internet, it's out in the open, but now they just do it right out in the open. They don't care that we see this. They don't care that we see what they're doing in Yemen. This is just open genocide all over the globe with our tax dollars.
Yes, we are paying for this. Yes.
So now what this Netanyahu now, is he saying that he isn't involved in this Epstein scandal, that naming that other prime minister, is that, I know he's trying to excuse his corruption, that he's in the trouble he's in over there. But now is he trying to say he's not involved in this global child sex trafficking network with Epstein?
I have not heard anything regarding a statement from him about his own potential involvement. I imagine he probably wouldn't point it out about Ehud Barak unless he was not tied to that. But
I've seen the stories. I researched the stories, and they did see that Barak coming out of Epstein's mansion there in New York, and young girls coming out right after him, and all this stuff. So I mean, that wasn't made up.
No, and of course, it's all the better if the story's true and it serves and it's politically expedient, which would be why Netanyahu would jump on the opportunity, because it's exactly what he did during his last emergency election in order to smear his opponent in that. So he would absolutely, it's all the better if it's true and you can use it to smear someone. I mean, that's what blackmail material is for, and that's what Jeffrey Epstein was all about. It's what NXIVM was all about. It was what the Playboy franchise is all about. It was what, Adnan Khashoggi was George H.W. Bush's human compromise operation. I mean, they're all over the place. So, and we have government by blackmail. That's what and if they don't have anything on you, they'll frame you. They'll just make it up.
Right. Now, Dershowitz, he's just a big fan of Israel, right?
Oh, yeah. No, an ardent Zionist. I mean,
yeah,
he's part of that machine for sure.
Sure.
He's
out there giving these interviews, and he's still calling these girls liars. Now there's 3 of them that say that Epstein forced them to have sex with Dershowitz, But he's out there saying these girls are liars, and they're prostitutes and all this stuff, But now I think he's blackmailing all the elites. I'm not kidding you. In these interviews, this one that I watched on July 18th, he said that he got a massage at Epstein's place, but it was by a 50-year-old Russian woman, and he only got one massage there. But then he goes on to say that hundreds of people got massages at Epstein's, and he says, including very prominent people got massages at Epstein's. So can you imagine all of these people that have been involved in this when he says something like this on public TV, in interviews?
No, that's an open threat. And Evelyn, at the same time, this Dershowitz has claimed to have no idea this was going on. Yet he knows that hundreds of people have gotten massages there. It's like, which is it? Did you or did you not know?
Well, exactly. And I mean, I'd never get the chance to interview him. I can't stand even looking at him. And I just force myself to watch these interviews. But I would immediately be saying, oh, really? Hundreds of people, important, prominent people. Name me a few.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
See, but they didn't.
Exactly.
See, that's what he wants. This is hanging over their heads. Hundreds.
Yeah, no, imagine what he knows. Remember, Alexander Acosta himself said on the record that he was told to back off of Jeffrey Epstein, that he belonged to quote unquote intelligence. Which intelligence is that would be nice to know, because he has direct ties to Mossad through Ghislaine and her father, Robert Maxwell, who was an Israeli super spy and stole the Promise software. And he stole so many secrets from the U.S. for Israel. There is a direct tie to Israel here. And so to let a super predator like Jeffrey Epstein walk on, dozens of counts of child sex trafficking, knowing full well that he would continue offending and had the means and motive to do it. I mean, what the hell is our law enforcement for? And yet we have all these people in jail for pot? Are you kidding me?
Sure. And then another thing that Dershowitz is doing, he's out here now, in one of the interviews, out here bragging about he had the perfect sex life and attacking attorney David Boyce, who represents the victims, And he said he only had sex with one person since he met Epstein, and that was his wife, and that's all. And then down here he goes, this is what he says about attorney David Boyce. I challenged David Boyce to say under oath that he only had sex with one woman during the same period of time. He couldn't do that. He had an enormous amount of chutzpah to attack me and challenge my perfect sex life during the relevant period of time. And I say to that, I don't care if Attorney Boyce was out there committing adultery with 100 women. I don't care a bit about that. We are taking down the child sex trafficking network. I don't care who David Boyce goes to bed with.
Right. It is not.
They're overage. It has nothing to do with this.
Clear
case.
Deflection. Clear deflection. Yeah. Yes, and you know someone is lying when they do something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, especially when there's all the okay. So Jeffrey Epstein is directly tied to Israeli intelligence. What the hell was he doing? We know his places were wired. We know the New York Police Department let him sell the Lolita Express on which these orgies between all these hundreds of wealthy and powerful people had, abusing these children on the plane. That's where all that forensic evidence would lie. Yet somehow the NYPD in the 2-3 weeks leading up to this big dramatic arrest managed to let that fucking thing slip away. Jeffrey Epstein sold it.
Yeah.
The one piece of evidence that could have tied, imagine, based on the flight logs, Evelyn, we have the evidence of who was on the plane. Now it would be just a question of, is there DNA there along with these girls?
Right. Well, they just subpoenaed all the pilots, all of Epstein's pilots, and the flight records, because up until now, we only have partial flight records from those pilots. And they can correspond this with all the girls that said when this took place. With the flight.
And the other thing, the thing
I read the deposition of one of those pilots, and he was there. They were asking him, well, didn't you think anything about this? He said he never noticed any underage girls all these years, And plus, he said, then he said, well, after he was charged, didn't you think about it then? And he said, no, he thought these girls were just all making up this stuff to be mean to Epstein.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to know their families. They have been threatened. I mean.
Oh, yes.
Look at all the people who have dropped dead, like the witnesses, and, gosh, think about it, Evelyn. And these, again, Jeffrey Epstein is also tied to DynCorp. Cynthia McKinney grilled Donald Rumsfeld about the issue of child sex trafficking by DynCorp. It was known. We know Pentagon, 5,000 Pentagon employees were caught with child porn on their work devices. These are people with security clearances who can be blackmailed with that material. Think about it. Not just that they have it at work and they haven't been fired. Congress is proposing more laws. It's like, it's already illegal. We don't need more laws. They should be fired and go to jail for possessing it, and they should be stripped of their security clearances. You can be blackmailed with that stuff. And if they have security clearances, they have access to sensitive information.
Sure. Well, I have no doubt that Epstein had all these cameras in all of his mansions and stuff, and he was recording them all. So we can't even imagine how many people are being blackmailed right at this moment.
No. And we know, for example, with NXIVM, Claire Bronfman was blackmailing, along with 5 federal judges, Chuck Schumer. And Chuck Schumer is also attached to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yep. Well, and then always saying that Dershowitz saying he never seen any underage girls, and he never seen. And there was a report out on July 18th that this Stephen Scully, a contractor who worked for Epstein for 6 years, beginning in 1999, he said that he saw a revolving group of young girls scattered throughout the island, riding ATVs or sunbathing topless at the pools and beaches on the island. He said they couldn't have been more than 15 or 16 years old.
Did he ever see Alan Dershowitz? Did he say if he ever saw Alan Dershowitz there?
No. He was just reporting about this is just a regular occurrence on that island. That these young girls are riding around, topless all over the island, riding on ATVs and sunbathing.
Yeah.
This is just a regular occurrence, and he worked through all that time, so he said it made him uncomfortable after he became uncomfortable with the hordes of young girls who didn't appear to have any parental supervision, so he wanted to cut ties with him. And he had met up with somebody from Miami, and the guy from Miami asked him if it was how it was up in Miami about those young girls being around, and the guy told him it was worse than the island. So this is going on in plain sight for everybody to watch.
Yep.
And nobody did nothing about it.
Well, and the thing, too, Evelyn, is like how many witnesses have said that, all over Jeffrey Epstein's homes are pictures, child pornography, pictures of these underage girls, nude or semi-nude. So, to say that you've been to his house and pretend to not have seen that is ludicrous. And at the same time, remember, Tony Podesta was, this is not a partisan issue. This applies to all of these people. And Tony Podesta, there was a feature on him in the New York Times where some of the photos had to be scrapped because in the piece itself, they talk about how there are pictures of nude children, some of them very young children, in these enlarged photographs and other things all over the house. That is child porn, and it is illegal. Why is it okay for these people who are, wealthy and influential to have that shit? It's illegal.
Yeah. Well, that's what part of that getting that plea bargain too. That Dershowitz and those attorneys claimed that Epstein helped found the Clinton Foundation,
right?
And that he helped set up the Clinton Foundation's Clinton Global Initiative, and this is part of this letter that they sent when they wanted this plea deal, pumping up his closeness with Clinton at the time. You know how Clinton came out and said he only seen him a couple times or something like this and everything. Yeah. Well, the investigators went and investigated, and they found out that, listen to this, back in 1993, Epstein and Maxwell attended this dinner at the White House when Clinton was first in office. And Maxwell, they donated, I forget, like hundreds of thousands of dollars to refurbish the Oval Office and the living quarters in the White House. And Epstein and Maxwell were there, and they contributed to this. This is how far back this goes.
Yeah, and the Clinton Global Initiative, again, remember, Maxwell is also tied to her father. Robert Maxwell was tied to Claire Bronfman's father, who is also a billionaire. And the Clinton Global Initiative, remember, there were multiple people from NXIVM who were invite-only members of the Clinton Global Initiative. And so these are not people who just donated. You had to be invited. So you would think there'd be a vetting process there of some sort, right? And then, and then remember, the Clinton Global Initiative closed down quietly over Christmas in 2000, after the election in 2016. They shut that piece down after the Podesta emails came out and started revealing all of this. And remember, Ben Zienke, who tied together, Anthony Weiner, Huma Abedin, Eric Schneiderman, Stormy Daniels and her attorney, and these were all people he identified, back in 2006, who, suddenly are turning back up in the news as the... So
they were at that NXIVM recruitment party, all these people, all the way back in 2007.
Yes. Yeah.
They're all involved in this. They're all involved. And that's why it was so great to see that Sabu put out that art tying Epstein, to Hollywood.
Yes, it's really great to see, people having it put right in their faces. And it's true. I mean, Harvey Weinstein has still not been held accountable. I mean, Kevin Spacey, and
they're all in Epstein's little black book.
Yep. And that's the thing, Evelyn, is that, Whitney Webb, who's a journalist and publishes frequently with Mint Press News, is doing I think it's a 3-part series on Jeffrey Epstein. And what she does is, this is government by blackmail. These are organized crime syndicates that have hijacked our government agencies and systems. And she does an amazing job of tracing the history back to show that, with Roy Cohen, for example, being a mentor to Donald Trump, and how Roger Stone being in there. Roy Cohen was, the human compromise guy for George H.W. Bush. I mean, he was the guy. He was a mafia lord, and so that's what's going on. That's what all of this is about, and that's why we're getting these outrageous military budgets, and we have our own U.S. representatives voting to criminalize criticism of Israel. I mean, these are all part of the same group of people who are behind the creation of Israel and the Zionist movement and the war on terror and, all these other, genocides and invasions going on, including Ukraine. I mean, it's just the same interest, but just there are different factions that are always vying for turf, and so they turn on one another in order to get leverage, and they're constantly looking to blackmail and threaten one another into abiding whatever it is they want to get done and what they want to profit. So I highly recommend Whitney Webb. She covers this topic very well and gets right to the heart of what's going on, because it's a system that everyone needs to understand, because that's what's controlling us. That's how people are being controlled right now.
Oh, absolutely. And it is so hard to keep all this straight now that it's all come together. And I was so glad when both the judges decided that they weren't letting Epstein out or R. Kelly out again.
Right.
And I thought that was a really good sign, because it's, my God, you've got to protect these children. You keep letting these monsters back out on the street, and they never stop.
No. But even with Epstein behind bars, unless a bunch of the people who are tied to him go to jail too, he'll just be replaced, just like Adnan Khashoggi was replaced. And, they just get replaced.
Yeah. Well, now he supposedly tried to commit suicide, but who knows if that's true or not, or if they tried to kill him.
Yeah, well, Patricia Hauser on Facebook dug up, how we had been seeing with these mass shootings, how stories started to turn up days before the actual incident? Well, it turns out she discovered the same issue with that story about Epstein, so it seems to have been some sort of ploy. Yeah.
Well, I've seen. I guess there's been 2 shootings now in the last day or something like this.
Yeah.
I'm not even reading those articles, because I consider them all false flags to distract from what is going on here.
Oh yeah.
We are investigating. So I'm not even reading those articles about it. I mean, it's not that I don't care that these people are getting killed, but the government pulls us every time.
Yeah.
So I'm not even looking at it. But, we talk about this in Hollywood. The first accuser of Roman Polanski was all the way back in 1969. Wow. And we let this go on and on and on. And
Wow.
and then he's out of the country and stuff, but the people want to ban him from coming in this country and everything. Well, then what people do, it was back in I forget what it was. He was arrested in Zurich in 2009, and U.S. authorities attempted to extradite him here. And that's when more than 100 celebrities signed a petition to free Polanski. They included Woody Allen, Harvey Weinstein, Martin Scorsese, Darren, I don't even know half of these people. But all these stars line up to let this guy out back in this country. We don't want him back in this country. So back in 2017, the Los Angeles Police Department opened a new investigation after 7 additional accusers came forward and reported that Polanski had molested. At that time, one was 10 years old in 1975.
Oh,
but
God.
They were Jane Does, and they were between the age of 9 and 16 when the assaults took place between 1969 and 1976. So that's 11 more accusers on this monster.
Wow.
So
horrifying.
It's just so disgusting.
It's a global crisis.
Disgusting.
It is a global crisis. You look at the Vatican too, Evelyn. I mean, everywhere you turn, these institutions and these powerful people are exploiting children in the most horrific ways. Yet again, the Vatican, did you see that the bones they uncovered under the Vatican when they were looking for this missing girl? They uncovered a whole series of human bones. And
that's what I was just going to say. Tell us about that. The Vatican officials
are claiming, they say they don't know. We didn't know what that was.
We don't know what that is?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And, they just last year in Pennsylvania, there was this long police report about how 300 priests in 6 Pennsylvania dioceses had been running a child grooming, sex trafficking, and pornography ring for 70 years on church property. They were using whips and sadistic methods, according to the police report. They victimized more than 1,000 children, and those are only the ones that even came forward and that were identified. I mean, and no one went to prison. None of them are being punished. This is a child sex trafficking and pornography ring run on church property. They should have seized the assets, and all the church officials should be facing trial.
Well, this is so scary, but it's all coming together. Now, and it's so hard to keep track of it all.
Yeah, it is. It is. But again, we have to keep looking up the food chain, because it all goes back to the same handful of families who are, behind all this devastation and are the ones who ultimately profit from the leverage that is gained through these human compromise operations run by people like Jeffrey Epstein and Claire Bronfman and Adnan Khashoggi and, Imran Awan. Same thing. He was doing the same thing. That was a human compromise operation.
He's coming back into the news now, Imran Awan.
Congress.
Yeah. Blackmailing Congress. Yeah.
And
now that folks they're looking over the links to Ghislaine Maxwell's says Do Nothing charity founded by her, that they're wondering if she was funding that whole thing, if she wasn't trafficking money through there and it was going back to fund Epstein's pedophilia network.
The laundering? Well, look at the Clinton Foundation. Renowned Wall Street analyst Charles Ortel has combed through every single document ever produced by the Clinton Foundation. And he has found that it has never, ever been properly registered as a charity, ever, in, 25 years since it's been around? Not only that, it's never had a legitimate audit. Eric Braverman, was he the CEO, resigned abruptly when it came time for them to finally produce an independent audit for the foundation, which they never actually did. Charles Ortel estimates that that fraud to exceed $1 trillion. And basically all they were doing was taking, billions and billions from Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and, all these wealthy, including all of these criminals that are turning up all over the place. And they're refusing to return the money, like to Harvey Weinstein or any of these, men who are accused of horrific crimes against, Hillary, every woman should be believed, Clinton. So, Charles Ortel is a very respected analyst, and he says there's absolutely nothing legitimate about that quote unquote foundation. And again, court documents connect Jeffrey Epstein directly with that, and so is it connected with NXIVM directly.
Right, they're all tied together. They're all tied together. And Ghislaine, like they're saying that that her and Chelsea Clinton were good friends. That her and Chelsea Clinton went on vacation in 2009. That would have been after Epstein was arrested. And her name came out in all those pleadings. How involved she was. I mean, it wasn't only that she procured these young girls; she participated in the sexual abuse with these girls. And would have orgies with them and everything. And why is she walking around free? But she was a member of that Clinton Global Initiative. And then she was at Chelsea's wedding, 2010. Right in the front row.
Yep. Right next to the aisle.
They are so mixed in with this stuff. It's just really scary. And then, they try to detach from this mess now. There's no way they're going to. Just like those investigators that went to the Clinton Library and found all those documents showing how Epstein and Ghislaine had been at the White House in 1993 when he just took office, and then they contribute to refurbishing the Oval Office and the living quarters of the White House.
What they probably did was install all kinds of spy equipment too.
Well, they say that Israel was spying on Clinton, and that Monica Lewinsky that Israel was blackmailing him back then with that.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. I bet that's how they did it. They were the ones that hired the contractors to go in there and remodel and also install all kinds of spy equipment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I never even thought of that. Sure. Oh, and then they're investigating, probing into his Epstein's jail stay and all the stuff that he was allowed to get away with there.
Not reporting ever as a, level 3 child sex offender.
Yeah. Right, letting the sex offender, I guess that they know that he was having sex with girls when he was out on release from his little short 13-month stunt there in the Miami jail.
Yes.
And they let him. And I guess he paid like $135 billion to that police department to fund those police departments that were supposed to guard him while he was out on his work release. Well, he paid $135,000 to fund him, so they'd let him do whatever he wanted.
Wow, yeah, it's horrifying. And I mean, these are the police who are expect to be taken seriously. They go around arresting people for criticizing Israel or pot, but yet here we have a serial predator who's given complete and total protection.
Well, and it's now in everything, and there's a state senator, Lauren Brock, in Florida, is the one calling for Epstein's work release records to be investigated and everything, and now she's getting threatened. She said I received countless phone calls saying, "Little girl, you don't know what you're getting into," and telling me that I should just stop. She reported this, and anybody that goes after these monsters that they threaten, and as we know, they kill. How many whistleblowers on this global child sex trafficking network have died and killed? No.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very dangerous.
Liz McKee. We also, don't forget, this, we mentioned this is global. There's also the connection with Prince Andrew. And remember, Jimmy Savile was exposed as being a brutal predator of terminally ill and disabled children throughout his career at BBC, which was covered up for years by none other than Mark Thompson, who went directly after being exposed for covering up Jimmy Savile's and former Prime Minister Ted Heath also raped and abused hundreds of children himself. Mark Thompson went in 2012 after being exposed directly to the CEO position at the New York Times, which in 2016 or 17, supposedly debunked the Pizzagate narrative, which is now exactly what is going on with Jeffrey Epstein. That's Pizzagate. Pizzagate is child sex trafficking by the wealthy and powerful. And here you have it, NXIVM, Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, Hollywood. That's it. That's Pizzagate.
Yeah. People probably don't understand that Pizzagate, that for us, that covers this whole child sex trafficking network. It's not just limited to those emails that were released. That is the title for all of this. Yeah. But like you say, he covered up he closed down that Pizzagate narrative on purpose. Yeah. Yep.
That's what he was
for. And so now this
for.
Florida lawmaker getting threats over calling for Epstein's plea deal probe. I mean, these people are taking great risks when they come out here.
They are, and that's why we have to support them and make sure that
absolutely.
Their stories get out.
What state senator was it? Was just murdered a month or so back, and the same thing. Supposedly she's going to be testifying about the sex trafficking in the Clinton Foundation, the ties to the Clinton Foundation, and they killed her.
Yep.
And they don't care anymore. They just do it right out in the open, and it happens, and it's like, oh wow, this is horrible, and it just goes away. It's like, oh well, another one killed.
You're right. I had forgotten about that, Evelyn.
Yep.
She was shot and rolled up in a rug. It was clearly an assassination. There's absolutely no question that she was assassinated.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see the records from these, or the depositions from these pilots. They finally, I think two of them had taken depositions before, and I read one of them. And, like I said, he just plays it down and says, no, he never believed any of it. He never, all those girls that got on them planes, going all over the globe. Yeah, and he says he never seen any underage girls.
Yeah.
When we have those court records, they'll say, yes, I was on this flight. They flew me to England. They flew me to Paris. Flew me over there to screw this one or that one. So, but I think if they kill Epstein, I think it still won't get shut down. I think I say we have an army, a global army, going after this global child sex trafficking network
we
now.
We do. That is
and we will keep fighting.
Yes.
Well, that's the end, Trish, but we shall keep up on this stuff, and we will keep y'all informed next week on the latest. So thank you, Trish, for coming on.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Okay, people, we'll see you next week. Have a good week. Bye.